impact can mean something good, something positive that people want to have happen. Impact can also mean something that maybe people are not as certain about or not as enthusiastic about. And it can mean changes that people don't necessarily welcome to their communities. So let's start with the two of you talking about, from your perspectives, the positive things that are either happening now or likely to happen as a result of the redevelopment of the train station, and then talk about things that you're maybe a little more apprehensive about.
A big concern in North Corktown is that we have all of this beautiful vacant land, and too much density is a concern for a lot of residents.
So you like the vacant land, and you don't want to see it all
not
crowded
all
up
of
with
it, yeah.
Okay.
We don't want to see every stretch of it covered with housing, especially if the housing is not affordable for the people who have weathered the storm. Because at one point, North Corktown was an empowerment zone, designated as an empowerment zone. And if I'm remembering correctly, that was usually, an empowerment zone was usually designated based on how dilapidated the neighborhood was.
Right, those were distressed neighborhoods.
Exactly.
The city said, hey, we're going to focus on trying to bring redevelopment and opportunity to those places.
Right. So we do have the development, but it's not accessible to everyone. I'm learning that there's a difference between affordability and low-income housing, and North Corktown has a mixture of all. So we want to determine how we can include everyone in what's going on in the neighborhood. And I'm hoping that the impact of Ford will spread throughout the city.
Sheila, you were involved with a lot of the negotiations between Ford and the neighborhood about how this should unfold and what kinds of things you wanted to see. Tell us about the upside of that and the potential downside.
I think the important thing to say is that the Neighborhood Advisory Council took very seriously its responsibility to represent all three neighborhoods, because the neighborhoods are different, have different needs, have different experiences relative to development, services, housing, et cetera. So we made sure in our community development, community benefits agreement, that we spoke to the issues that people were concerned about. For example, there was interest in North Corktown to create a sanctuary for the pheasants.
Right.
That's something people in North Corktown wanted to have happen. That's in the development agreement. There was interest in making sure that the agricultural efforts in North Corktown were maintained. Hubbard Richard was very concerned about not having the view of the train station lost to a parking structure. I guess as chair of the NAC, and we had a great team of really serious people on our council. We had a great working relationship with the planning department, which is key because it's got to be a collaborative relationship, and we had a special partner, in my opinion, with Ford. And let me tell you, the ethos, the ethics, the position that Ford takes as being part of the impact zone and not imposing itself on the impact zone was something that I have not generally seen corporations come to the table with that kind of a framework. So it is a collaboration. We look forward to 2020 seeing some of the elements that with our priorities, which is affordable housing, which includes, to your point, Tricia, low-income housing being not only maintained but expanded in the impact zone, making sure that job creation and job training is available to all members of the impact zone. Some of these priorities are going to begin to take shape.
And no downside?
Oh, downsides. Parking is a downside. But parking has been an issue in Corktown. I mean, I grew up here. Parking was an issue because guess what? This part of the impact zone was built before there were cars. So for this part of Corktown, this part of the impact zone, parking is going to be an issue. Resolution, I don't think is here. I also think one of the issues that we're all, an entire impact zone, going to have to deal with is people being priced out. Now, one of the interesting developments, or one of the big interesting issues about that is who are the people who are raising rents? Are they big outside corporations or suburban companies coming in? There's some of that. But there's also people who've lived in the whose families have been in this neighborhood for generations, who have a chance to, having been the custodians, having been the protectors of keeping Corktown, you know, this part of the impact zone together, particularly have a chance to reap the benefits. And so people are looking to sell, and that is impacting people's ability to stay. At some point, we need to find throughout the city, in terms of the issue of gentrification, the creation of some kind of pot of money that literally is rent subsidy, or in the alternative, we need to look at, in some situations, legislating rent control so that there's a way to ensure that everybody who wants to be here can stay.
That was going to be my next question, was about displacement or potential displacement because of something like this. I wonder how big a concern that is, both across the freeway and down here on Michigan Avenue. We'll go back to Tricia first to talk about what's happening in North Corktown.
It's a big concern that people are priced out of the neighborhood that they have lived in for 40 years, paid taxes for 40 years, and all of a sudden, because the neighborhood is popular, they're no longer desired residents. And we want everyone to benefit from what's going on in the neighborhood, not just a select few, but everyone. And we want to bring back being able to create generational wealth in Detroit. And home ownership is the number one way to do that.
Yeah.
In Detroit, at one time, was the number one place that, especially an African American,
For
could
single-family
create
home ownership.
Exactly. And
Now it's the largest place for single-family rental.
right, which
Yeah.
is ridiculous. We don't want people to be priced out, but we haven't figured out how to manage that or how to address that challenge.
Yeah. Sheila, you were part of the negotiations for the community benefits agreement. Talk about what the response was from the people at Ford to this idea of protecting residents who've been here, protecting low-income housing and opportunities for people who might get pushed out by that kind of development.
Sure. Ford put their money where their mouth is, because not only did they say those are all great ideas, they put $11 million in hard cash into the community benefits agreement, and working closely with Arthur Jemison, who's here today, working strategically with he and others, we were able to have Ford put in the agreement that Ford would make contributions to the Strategic Neighborhood Fund and the Affordable Housing Leverage Fund in ways that permits the city to invest more heavily in those dollars in the impact zone. Actually, over 30 years, it'll be a benefit that plays out to $22.5 million worth of investment in housing and in things that directly benefit residents here. Another thing I would say as an aside here in this part of Corktown, Hubbard Richard's had a great resident association for generations, so has North Corktown. In Corktown proper, there have been, since it's the oldest neighborhood in the city, there have been periods where there have been more organization than other. But right now, we have 3 organically developing block clubs, which is really good.
Can I go back, Dorothy? Can you tell us a little bit about, the block club and I guess
Sorry,
the feeling, I guess, of you gonna get her up.
All right, no, I got the same
But the idea of the participation, and do you feel like you're being listened to in a lot of these processes?
Yes, we actually have a number of members that come to every meeting, which we have once a month. We filed our constitution and bylaws, and I will now say we are officially registered with the city as an official block club. And so we will have a voice in what's happening at our end of the world.
My name's MATTSON. I don't live in Corktown, North Corktown, or Hubbard Richard, but I'm a community organizer in Southwest Detroit. So we work with all of the residents of Southwest Detroit, including Corktown, North Corktown, Hubbard Richard. And we just see housing prices skyrocketing, and that can be really great for homeowners, but it can also be really tough on renters. And so we've been working with, especially with renters, thinking about how to make sure that they're protected, encouraging folks who run different apartments, especially low-income housing, to be more transparent with their decision-making. I know there's pressure to sell, pressure to convert to market rate, so thinking about how we can support renters in that.
Okay.
Another issue having to do with housing, particularly in North Corktown, is the land bank. The land bank owns all this vacant property, and sometimes you have to be some sort of classical scholar of some language that I don't know to find out what the land bank's rules are.
I also live in North Corktown, and many neighbors have complained of the lack of transparency and access to the land bank in the past. Hopefully that will change. I myself am a homeowner, and I rent out units, and I did notice a lot of a rapid increase in cold calls for me to sell my building. So I'm assuming that other homeowners might get the same type of cold calls to sell their buildings as well.
So last question I have is, so we've got Historic Corktown, North Corktown, Hubbard Richard. So we've got a lot of different organizations all in the same place. And you might assume that there would be competing interests among those organizations. You guys seem to be working together pretty well at this point. Was it always that way, or did you have to iron out some differences?
Well, I think the structure imposed on the Ford development, which is sort of the latest trigger, was to create this impact zone, which I think was a good way to put us all in a position of being more inclined to work together. And I do think that the process that we use, that the time and energy that all of our representatives, on the 9 of us on the Neighborhood Advisory Council, the way we dealt with it, every single idea, anybody gave us an idea, we had a spreadsheet. Everybody's voice was heard. There's a real sense that there's a common interest, and that when there are issues, we need to come together to work them out. So I think that's also been a big feature.
I agree. The common interest is what brought us all together. It was a very tedious process, and we're pretty open about making sure that everyone got the communication about the meetings that were going on. So I didn't see too much disagreement.
I didn't either.
Yeah, because when everyone's voice is heard, I think you can, it's easier to compromise.
Right.